and I will act as event master for this occasion. And I need to tell you that the recording has started, and you'll be muted until you ask questions, and therefore you'll be let in also with the microphone. There were almost 240 registered participants in this event, and we only have 2 hours. So we try to make the most out of it. And without any further ado, I would like to welcome and thanks those who made this event possible, who are Andrea Halmos, the Head of Unit Deputy from Interoperability and Digital Government Unit from DIGIT. Thank you, Andrea, for joining. And Michele Vespe, Deputy Head of Unit of the Digital Economy Unit at the Joint Research Center in ISPRA. By the way, welcome from the stormy ISPRA. And they will welcome you and will introduce you into the context and the content of this webinar. Thanks a lot. And Andrea, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I see people are still joining, so I hope that we can start, because indeed there is not a lot of time. So let me welcome you with a few slides to set a little bit the policy context of GovTech, of what we're trying to do also from the Commission side. I work in a unit that is responsible for interoperability and digital government, as Marina mentioned, and this is indeed a unit that has also most recently put in place a new legislation, which is called the Interoperable Europe Act. And this is the first legislation that actually makes reference to the GovTech community, to the GovTech ecosystem. And I would like to introduce you this act and how we're supposed to, or we're planning to support activities within this ecosystem. So this Interoperable Europe Act is a regulation that came into force in April this year, and which means that most of its aspects will be already applicable within 3 months, except a few of its articles within 9 months. So this summer and early next year, we will be actually implementing and putting all the requirements into action. This regulation is applicable for all public administrations in the European Union, be it local, regional, national, and even EU level. And it actually aims at making better public services, making sure that the public services, digital public services, work across borders. Because each time a data exchange across borders is supposed to happen, then there is some preliminary checks to be done. And with that, we hope that obviously not just cross-border, but also cross-domain and between different levels of government type of services will also become more user-friendly. The Act itself includes a number of provisions, but what is relevant here is that it has a set of articles which tries to strengthen the support from the Commission towards all kinds of public sector innovation type of measures. And we call these under both innovation measures and so-called policy implementation support measures. And these innovation measures, so supporting public sector innovation, actually foresee the participation or the engagement of so-called GovTech actors. So if you really read the articles, it says that for many of these innovation measures, including, for example, the regulatory sandboxes, which we will also set up, the engagement of small and medium-sized enterprise startups and other innovative companies can actually bring great benefits. We also know, of course, that from another angle, the GovTech market is a very promising set of companies that could actually reach about 9 billion euros when combining all kinds of data that was that we found in a study carried out by one of our projects. Obviously, there are different estimations, but we do believe that indeed, if sufficient number of companies could actually start working with administrations, that could bring, first of all, this interesting benefit for growth and the economy, but also really innovative solutions to public administrations. If we look at the GovTech ecosystem, we're not starting from scratch just with this legislation. Obviously, you have that on the right-hand side, but we already have, as you know, the public sector Tech Watch, which is really the overarching frame of this series of workshops. This is the observatory that includes close to 1,000 use cases where administrations use emerging technologies. But it also includes, for example, some ongoing European-funded projects, such as the GovTech Connect project, which is really creating this community and identifying interesting GovTech actors in all corners of Europe and creating boot camps. And they're also working on a foresight study, as well as the GovTech for All incubator, which brings together national initiatives, GovTech initiatives, and digitization innovation agencies to carry out pilots. In addition to these activities, there's quite a number of other initiatives that we believe also support this GovTech ecosystem. We have to mention here the European Digital Innovation Hubs. As you probably some of you know, there's a whole dedicated working group that works with the public administrations that want to use AI. And we see that because they are on a regional, on the ground in European regions, they are and they are the ones who try to bring companies to test, for example, AI solutions with governments. They can be also the ones who can actually foster this GovTech market. We have obviously the public sector Tech Watch, which tries to create not just this being an observatory, but also a community with reports and events. And then we also have colleagues who work on innovative procurement and also innovation procurement. And here I just mentioned two initiatives, the SPIN for EIC, which is a strategic innovation procurement program, and public buyers. They have a community platform where there's issues related to procuring innovation, but also for the AI. And there's a number of other events or initiatives such as studies you will hear about later from the Joint Research Center, and as well as capacity building programs such as this bootcamp I mentioned, but also some training material that we make available through the Interoperable Europe Academy. How you could engage today, these of course all have their websites and initiatives are ongoing, but perhaps two concrete possibilities. I did mention this sort of boot camp that this GovTech Connect project runs in all the four corners of Europe, if I may say so. And the Eastern European boot camp will start on the 2nd of September. So there's still time to apply for that, and they help in startup acceleration. And the GovTech for All incubator, they run pilots, and for the last pilot they're currently working on, it's a startup challenge. So they're looking for groundbreaking solutions in areas such as energy efficiency and energy management, especially in municipalities. Now, I mentioned this Interoperable Europe Act and how it foresees the engagement with the GovTech actors. But then there's another element in it, which I think is really relevant for today's discussion. And I think today what we will hear is about how do we go about cross-border collaboration between GovTech actors? How do we ensure that those piloted solutions can actually scale up and others can use it, and that these companies can actually then internationalize or go to other European markets? And I think what is interesting here to keep in mind is that the Interoperable Europe Act also includes a set of provisions that really try to foster the reuse of interoperable solutions. So we will have a so-called interoperability assessment. As I said before, a new system or a new service is put in place that has cross-border data exchange and assessment has to be done, whether or not it will have an impediment on interoperability. And at the same time, they should, the organization carrying out this test should also look at what existing interoperability solutions could be reused. So it's a really strong incentive for reuse. We also have a provision in the regulation that talks about share and reuse, meaning if an administration sees another administration using a solution, unless it's under IP rights or other restrictions, they should be in the position to share it. And so this is, again, a very strong incentive for share and reuse. We will make all these solutions and others available through the portal. There is a single portal now, revamped and rebranded as Interoperable Europe Portal. For those that knew before, it was called Join Up. And there will be actually some really labeled solutions that will get a specific label that should really be considered for reuse when carrying out these tests. So there's an ample of encouragement and incentives for reusing solutions. And we think that actually, if a GovTech pilot creates such solutions, they will have greater chances of making them easier to be used in other contexts as well. So I would just like to leave you with this thought for reflection, and I wish you a really, really productive event and good discussions. And I would like now to hand it over to my colleagues from the Joint Research Center. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Andrea. Thank you for this panoramic, this landscape of the initiatives that the Commission is putting in place on GovTech. They all seem complementary to each other. So from experimentation to putting together the actors in this area, and now with the study that Michele will introduce, we'll get to the core, the underlying, let's say, influencing factors that determine the successful take-up of cross-border interoperable solutions. Thank you very much, Michele, for stepping in and tell us all about this, the context of this project.
Many thanks, Marina, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michele Vespe, and I work for the Digital Economy Unit of the Joint Research Center. And we would also like to welcome you all to this webinar today. I will be very brief, so I will go for the objectives of the study, very broad. I will present something about the objectives of this event today, and then I will lead you to the discussion, the actual discussion. So we have long-standing collaboration between the Joint Research Center and DIGIT within the Commission, and we look at policy areas, different policy areas, in particular, in this case, relevant to digital public administrations in Europe and interoperability. As already mentioned by Andrea, GovTech is a key, is a very instrumental approach when it comes to the organizational level to facilitate the uptake, but also the use of innovative and emerging technologies in support to and to improve also public governance in general. So public procurement in particular is one of the most common ways also for public administrations to acquire and mainstream innovative digital solutions that cannot be or are not possible to be developed in-house in public administration. And this study in particular focused on GovTech practices and highlighted influencing factors, as Marina mentioned already, that could boost or also hinder, on the other side, the uptake of innovative digital solutions designed always to support interoperable cross-border operations and collaborations, as Andrea also mentioned. So all these aims at a successful digital transition and modernization of the public sector in Europe, of course. So going to the objectives of the study, there are mainly three. The first one is to outline and to give an overview of the state of the art of GovTech practices, as well as the actors in the European Union. The second objective is to identify the challenges and opportunities and those enabling and obstacles, the influencing factors, as well as common requirements and framework conditions to support GovTech practices in Europe. And finally, the third objective is to formulate recommendations that you will see with respect to application of the Interoperable Europe Act, as well as highlighting some directions from a research perspective, so something that is also very interesting to the Joint Research Center in particular and for us. So the objectives of the webinar are just very brief summary is again to present the conceptual framework, including key and common factors influencing cross-border interoperable GovTech practices in Europe. A second objective for the event today is to highlight some policy implications and as well those influencing factors that I mentioned and the common requirements. And to discuss is another objective is the discussion on the preconditions, potential measures, solutions, but also recommendations for GovTech actors to address cross-border interoperability and the reusability requirements for the successful implementation of the Interoperable Europe Act. So if there's an additional one that indeed, as I mentioned, is also a platform where you can help us collect possible research questions and questions that we do our research in the future. So I invite you to have active participation in the discussion, and all of the actors, policymakers, public research practitioners, GovTech experts, intermediaries, and so forth. So thank you for helping us in bridging the regulatory work and the implementation side of it through the identification of good practices and addressing these common challenges towards the achievement of our shared objectives. So over back to you, Marina, for starting.
Thank you very much, Michele and Andrea. You really made this study and this event happen. Thanks again for allowing us this interesting exercise. And now I would like to introduce you to those who actually carried out the study. We are two renowned experts from the University of Bremen. The lead expert is Professor Dr. Professor Bjorn Nyhaves from the University of Bremen. He is an expert in digital transformation of public services and artificial intelligence for the public sector. He is currently conducting a study in Germany on GovTech together with the German federal states, and he's the GovTech representative of the federal state of Bremen. And Dr. Gerhard Claassen, expert in digital government and organizational transformation, expert also in artificial intelligence applied in the public sector, and especially in the assessment of technologies and their use, therefore take up in this case of the public administrations. Thank you very much, Bjorn and Gerhard, for your dedication, and the floor is yours. Now you are going to tell us what the outputs and the results and suggestions that you identified through this study. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure being here and being able to present the results. It took us a few months of actually quite hard work to actually get to these conclusions. And it's a really great moment to be able to discuss those findings with you and also take up your input and your ideas and your reflections of these results in order to make a good final document and really get your insights and your perspectives into the document as well. So GovTech in Europe, it's about critical influencing factors for cross-border GovTech practices. And we started off with the research questions. That's what we do in the study. That's what we do as a scientist. And that is what factors critically, both positively and negatively, influence cross-border GovTech practices in Europe. And that was what was mentioned in the introduction, and that is what was mentioned in the call for participation for this webinar. So that's what we're really trying to answer here. One little thing to add here is that we focused on GovTech startups focusing on companies that started up to 10 years ago. So we're not looking at, let's say, a Microsoft. We're not looking at how SAP is spreading around Europe and other big established companies, but we were looking especially at GovTech startups that were funded 10 years or less ago. And that was really in order to show how those that really bring up new ideas and, that bring in a lot of innovation spirit to the public sector, how those actually encounter success factors, positive and negative success factors, when they try to expand beyond borders in Europe. Good. So how did we approach this? Unfortunately, there is no book in neither my shelf nor in anybody's shelves. I can nearly guarantee that already answers these questions, because it's a very specific question. Of course, we have a little bit of literature on ecosystems. We have a literature on GovTech. We have literature on cross-border expansion, but we didn't have literature, we didn't find it that brings it all together, how GovTechs actually expand in Europe across borders. So how did we approach this? We actually took into account, and that's what we do when we find an area that is under-researched and under-explained. What we do is we try to take into account different perspectives that all bring a contribution to solving that puzzle. And those three perspectives that we took into account was, first of all, we had a look at programs like practice on GovTech that is out there. Then we had a look at the theory and how to reflect it with theory. And then we had a look at the empirical insights, not only bringing us detailed empirical insights, but also in helping us to develop a framework for us to understand how critical success factors impact cross-border GovTech practices. So when we look at the left-hand side first, what do we do in order to understand what really practice and practice view brings to the table? And the next slide. We find, for instance, on the left-hand side, we find a few countries that are good at e-government and GovTech, and we studied a lot of their national programs and what they were aiming at in order to support cross-border GovTech practices. And this is actually what national programs try to solve for their GovTech startups in order for them to be able to go beyond their national border. That was the first thing we took into account. The second thing that we took into account was then again a little bit of literature. And we find it on the next slide. Yes, we took, for instance, among many other perspectives, we took into account the Eisenberg framework, which is let's say a structural framework for understanding startup ecosystems and typical challenges and positive factors, so what we understand as critical success factors in startup ecosystems. And that's what we took into account as well. And these two perspectives, practices of national programs and what they are trying to aim at or what they're trying to solve for their GovTechs, theory, we took that into account together with empirical reflection. And that was actually quite comprehensive, so to say, because this is really one of the largest GovTech studies that we were able to find, actually the largest, because we have about 20,000 data points analyzed in this study. We were able to analyze more than 110 interviews with GovTech startups, so mainly with the founders of those GovTech startups, and we were able to cover 17 countries across Europe and 15 countries within the European Union. And we were able to ask them about these research questions. What hinders or what supports you in going across the border? And we took this into account as well. Next slide. We actually, after every 10 interviews, we iterated the framework, and then we came to this what we are presenting you here as well, is actually a framework that contains 7 major dimensions into which we were able to structure the success factors, the critical success factors that support or hinder cross-border practices of GovTechs in Europe. And that starts with policy, goes from finance, culture, support activities, human capital, markets, into the specific domain of technology. And what we found, Gerhard is going to present the empirical results of these 111 interviews and how they actually shed lights on these 7 specific dimensions of critical success factor for cross-border GovTech practices in Europe.
Thank you, Björn, for the introduction. Thank you to the organizers of this workshop, and thank you for you being here and giving us the opportunity to present our results. The first thing you probably notice about this final framework is that unlike the Isenberg framework, the main categories cannot be clearly separated. Instead, they overlap significantly. And that means if we look into the interviews, there are statements that could, for instance, fall under multiple categories such as markets, finance, and support simultaneously. We also found evidence for another key category, which was not in the Isenberg framework, but is probably not very surprising in the field of government technology, namely technology. And we also discovered that these categories are strongly influenced by current policies, leading policy being omnipresent across all these categories. So in the next slides, I will discuss each of these categories in detail. And in case you find some elements appearing in different categories than you would have expected, this slide explains you why this is the case. In each of these categories, we also identified clusters and subcategories, which we use to code the interviews. I won't go into detail here, but it should just serve as an explanation that there are actually more issues than just the burning issues, which you can find on the right-hand side of these slides. And I will also summarize one or two quotes of each category, which is highlighting some of the burning issue. So let's start with the first category, which is obviously policy. And in the case of policy, we had one outstanding quote, which is somehow summarizing a very frequently occurring statement of GovTech founders. The startup interviewed in this case was first active in its home market, which is Spain, and then had the opportunity to enter the Dutch market. And the municipality they were trying to cooperate with confronted them with different data protection regulations than they knew from their home market. And although this company in particular was able to cope the problems, we had interviews with GovTech founders who decided to avoid these markets where they face similar issues. And one might ask why this is happening in the first place, since there are European regulations, but somehow there are countries which are extending those regulations anyway. And it goes even that far that these regulations can also vary from municipality to municipality or city to city within the same country. And at the same time, it is absolutely intransparent how this happens and who is responsible for this kind of adjustment. So either it is a different interpretation of existing regulations, or the regulations are extended for some other reason. But what is exciting is that most GovTechs said that it is great if there is a regulation or a directive, because this gives GovTechs some kind of orientation. And a good example for this is the anti-laundering directive, which also could or should enforce an API for the ultimate beneficial owners of legal entities. The problem is just that not every country implemented this API, and this is the case also for other directives and policies. Especially this statement about the UBO, especially, we found from GovTechs which provide solutions overlapping with the banking or financial sector. Other often occurring statements in this category included the lack of legal and procurement translations and the lack of political expertise on open source and IOP. And especially this is also exciting because open source and IOP are very often confused by decision makers, according to GovTech founders. So let's have a look at the policy recommendations. When we ask GovTechs how the burning issues could or should be fixed, they often want one policy across the European Union, which should be not only be mandatory across all countries within the European Union, but also should be closely monitored. So it is not sufficient just to release a policy. It has to be monitored as well. Also, what seems to be important to GovTechs, we asked, is that they do not have to prove again and again that they are GDPR compliant. Here, GovTechs believe that a European-wide certificate could help to avoid multiple proofs. And for the language barrier, there could be a quick solution like a repository of national, legal, and procurement documents in English. Just a short explanation here. The policy recommendations which have the highest impacts according to the GovTechs are those with the exclamation marks, and the policies which could be implemented rather fast are marked with the stopwatch and the lightning. The implications we extracted from the interviews here are, first, that GovTechs feel a lack of policy enforcement, and second, that the fragmentation of policy across the EU is worse than an over-regulation. When looking at the category finance, GovTechs complain about costs for development and scaling, which is also an issue because they find themselves in endless loops of creating pilots and POCs, proving their credibility and trustability again and again. And these POCs and pilots are rather cost intensive and also pose a risk to a lot of GovTechs. In addition to that, there is this kind of expectation from the customers. That means municipalities, cities, public sector institutions, and so on, that if they pay a GovTech, they decide about the product. And this statement occurred actually very often in the interviews, and it is also within the quote. But it is not only the decision about the product itself, it is also the never-ending customization requests by the customers, leading to extreme development costs and make the GovTech even more reliant to their customers. And this power imbalance is probably one of the most striving issues GovTechs face. And according to the GovTechs, it can only be tackled if public authorities start rethinking whether they want to have the next customized solution, which goes along with all the costs for development, maintenance, updates, and so on, or if public authorities change their mind and they want a solution which is used by several tens or hundreds other public authorities. And don't get me wrong here, most interviewees underpin the importance of feedback-based development, but that does not mean that one municipality or city or public authority has the right to change the product just because they want a certain adjustment. And a relatively quick fix for this could be an institution like the Tech Watch, which researches the market for a European GovTech solution to a given problem. Also, what GovTech said is that it is very difficult to get funded in non-home markets. And well, this might be shifting a little bit. During our interviews, we had two examples from the Netherlands and France where GovTechs from other countries actually got funded, but this is still an exception. And this also reveals some kind of, let's say, or let's call it interpretation of public authorities, where GovTechs are seen as the possibility to support a local startup rather than the possibility to drive the digital transformation. Some countries also claim for regional offices, and lacking these regional offices often makes the market entry impossible for the GovTechs. In this context, the quote shows a positive example, which is of course only possible with the necessary budget at hand. Also, the lack of trust is a huge problem, which also is the reason for the never-ending loops of POCs I mentioned before. Other important statements were about the language barrier, which is a huge problem because decision makers do not always speak or want to speak English. And additionally, GovTechs mentioned that partaking in expertise groups like European councils is very important for them, as they expect a direct involvement in European standardization and policy making through that. Therefore, GovTechs should also be actively invited to these councils. And there were also interviewees who said that GovTechs cannot survive if they do not take part in GovTech ecosystem events in the countries they are active in. Overall, the exchange between GovTechs seems to be crucial, and therefore something like startup centers for GovTechs would be really helpful. But of course, it is not only about the exchange between GovTechs, but it is also about the opportunities to find new possible customers. And this could be, for example, could be fixed quickly, for example, by a European matching program. Regarding the protectionism, which is definitely there, the GovTechs said that, or the most GovTechs said that they would opt for a policy against it. GovTechs also asked for something like a European credibility certificate, which could facilitate the market entry to other countries in Europe. And this is also mentioned in the quote of the next category, support, where a GovTech was supported by a trade council who reached out for them to municipalities and cities in other countries. And this involvement of a trusting party was one key factor for cross-border expansion for some of the interviewed GovTechs. Well, good for those who know about this possibility. A lot of startups we interviewed were unaware of supporting institutions like trade councils or those innovation agencies like Business Sweden or Business Finland. Furthermore, in order to promote their solutions, GovTechs also heavily rely on external networks and partnerships, and some kind of marketplace for transnational solutions could help here. Speaking about human capital, the most important for GovTechs is international employment. And the argument for this is easy to understand. GovTechs often do not have the problem to find employees, as they are very mission driven, and therefore it is easy to get new employees. But what they face are problems to employ talent. And this would change if there were less barriers in employing across countries within Europe. Also, the different way of hiring is problematic, as GovTechs usually do not have even an overview about the most important advertising channels in certain countries, which may vary from country to country. It was also said that this is a huge advantage of the United States over the European Union, since if a GovTech manages the market entry in the US, they have access to the whole US market at the same time. And this is not the case in European countries. There are also companies which identified this problem and who provide subcontracted labor across European countries. But these companies are very expensive, and therefore most GovTechs can just not afford the service they provide. And according to the GovTechs, this can only be fixed on policy level, since the hindering factors are bound to different tax regulations within countries across Europe. There might be a temporary fix for this, like the implementation of a knowledge platform for hiring abroad, but it should be clear that the legal framework for cross-border hiring within the European Union does not meet the requirements of our time. When speaking of markets, GovTechs do not always understand the political structure in the market they target to be active in, and therefore they have difficulties to identify the decision makers or simply cannot access the decision makers. Another problem is related to the visibility in government procurement platforms and the access to potential clients, as mentioned before already. But probably the most interesting finding here, also underpinned by the quote, is that GovTechs try to avoid tedious legal systems by moving their main sites to other countries. And this could also explain why we have significant differences in the number of GovTechs active in certain European countries. The policy recommendation with the highest impact, according to the interviewed GovTechs, is the creation of mandatory public procurement directories. That means mandatory directories like TED, but without a threshold value, as GovTechs regard low-budget tenders often as a first entry to public authorities. And another market entry could be enabled through GovTech showrooms where European solutions could be demonstrated to local public authorities. What concerns GovTech most in terms of technology is the lack of or inconsistent standardization or APIs, as well as the integration with the local data and IT infrastructure. And this is especially the case in Germany, but also in other countries in which governmental IT providers act against innovative solutions in fear of losing business. And this also goes hand in hand with incoherent open data initiatives, which in some countries even vary from municipality to municipality and lead to a huge stack of interfaces. And the problem about these interfaces is not the implementation of them, but rather its management. I remember a GovTech said that it has about 80 APIs implemented, and every time an API changes, they have to first identify the issue and then fix the API. And this is not bearable for small teams, which GovTechs usually have. This said, it is not surprising that the policy recommendation with the highest impact is the creation of uniform data standards and APIs across the whole European Union. And there are 2 or 3 cases which were really alerting. After some negotiations, those GovTechs were offered to move the company to a certain country. And denying this offer led to the copy of the GovTech solution by local IT providers. And this means that this power imbalance of public authorities and GovTechs is actively abused, and therefore stronger support in protecting GovTech solutions is required. Thank you so far, and I hand over back to you, Björn.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, you have heard about the objectives and also the research question, and then you have seen all different facets in those 7 large categories that were able to collect the critical success factors for cross-border GovTech practices. Let me now just give you a little cut through these details by bringing up a specific perspective and maybe rephrasing it in a few different words. Let's make a little thought experiment. What if your primary goal was to digitally transform and modernize public administration? What would happen if you would really try to modernize public administrations, right? How would you approach it? Well, the answer would be you would try to make use of the huge European or maybe global GovTech market and facilitate the import of cutting-edge services and GovTech solutions, right? You would try to make use of GovTech solutions not only in your home city, not only in your home country, but maybe across all of Europe and maybe globally. You would try to import. But then on the other hand, let's make the second part of the thought experiment. What if your primary goal was to nurture and protect your own local digital economy? A whole different objective. What would happen? How would it find itself in reality? Well, you would facilitate the export of locally developed GovTech solutions. You would furthermore try to develop locally specific features that foreign GovTechs won't be able to adapt to. And thirdly, you would overemphasize local cultural knowledge, language skills in the procurement process, or, for instance, having a local subsidiary. That's what Gerd also mentioned today. So those are two very different goals. And what we didn't find, at least not in a very large scale, just a few examples of bilateral exchange and some venture clienting units in the public sector that had about 20% of foreign GovTechs that they were trying to get into their administration, but very few examples. What we didn't find was things to transform and modernize the public administrations in terms of importing GovTech services. But what we did find, and that was the vast majority, about 98% of the cases, was export-oriented GovTech support measures, and also a lot of local specificities and a lot of local kind of overemphasis of things in the procurement process that gives an advantage to local actors instead of foreign actors. And that is what we found empirically. So let me bring up some questions that might stir up the discussion. Is the current GovTech ecosystem building efforts, are these only or maybe primarily about local or national economic development rather than administrative modernization, right? If the slide before, if that was true, right? So against the background of the findings and what we were able to mirror against the interviews of GovTech units, yes, it is. It is mostly about, well, let's say economic development and very little about really modernizing public administration. That's what it really appears to. And let's discuss it afterwards. Second question, do current export focused and a little bit protectionist in quotation marks practices help or sabotage the GovTech ecosystem development in the long run? Because it sounds also great. I mean, you protect your own local GovTechs and then you help them grow in markets that are not that much protected. Well, we had a few interviews here. And as you might imagine, in the first few years, it might help if something is protected. But then if the GovTech from a protected market, let's say one national country in the EU, tries to go to another national market in the EU, well, then the problems come. And it's really, at the moment, we're not really seeing a free market of GovTech solutions and best practices in Europe because it's very, let's say, it's very much oriented towards economic development from, let's say, more a regional or a national perspective. Rather, it is than viewing it from the European perspective and really trying to modernize the public administrations in Europe by making use of the free market of GovTech solutions in Europe. And that's really a finding that we would like to discuss with you.
Thank you very much, Dolph and Gerard and Bjorn, for this quite interesting landscape and situation. That's the very last issue you raised is really, really very interesting. So the GovTech ecosystem seems to be driven overall by a controversial issue. So there are different goals underpinning the dynamics. So the political versus the economic one. For the political one, we should modernize public administrations by importing the most innovative and promising solutions. But in order to support local economy, local administrations, and their ecosystem, you are saying that you see much of the protectionism coming up with exports rather than import. That's quite interesting. And with this reflection, I would like to open up the floor to the public. Please don't hesitate to ask questions to Bjorn and Gerard. In doing this, please, when you raise your hand, when you take the floor, please say your name and say which entity you represent so that we know what kind of stakeholder, what GovTech actor you are representing. Thank you very much. We have 5-10 minutes dedicated to the public. Please don't hesitate. Any question? Nothing in the chat? Okay. We do have a question in the chat.
Yes, there is a question in the chat.
Okay. Should the EU consider shifting focus towards incentivizing and supporting venture capital funds that specifically target GovTech startups like the EIF instead of creating additional public administered fund? Who would like to take this question? Even Andrea, I mean, if you're still, I know that you're still there. Bjorn, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I can at least from the perspective of the study, I can contribute a little piece to the answer maybe. It really, like, what we have found was not really on the funding end of GovTechs, right? I mean, of course, it's good to have capital, let it be venture capital or other capital, but it's really, in the long run, it's important that GovTechs actually get access to the market not only in their home countries, but also in other countries. And there are other barriers that were even higher and that were more significant than just getting funding in terms of venture capital. Yeah, so it might be a good complementary thing that might solve other problems than those that we have been able to focus through the interviews in our study.
Definitely. At the same time, we know that at the same time there are different initiatives from the Commission to support the funding of startups, like, for example, those implemented by the European Innovation Council. In your interviews, did you notice whether the administrators, no, rather the startup founders knew about these European initiatives, or they were rather focused on the local initiatives, supporting initiatives? Gerard, maybe you would like to take this question.
Yeah, a lot of GovTech founders were surprised. There's something like GovTech Connect or the Join Up. They didn't know about European networks or European GovTech networks. They even knew more about these like these councils where they wanted to be active in. They knew less about the opportunities on European level.
Okay. So we do need to work a little bit in-house to make more visible our initiatives. Okay, I see that there are questions in the chat. Would you please raise your hands and ask questions directly? Because these are interesting questions. So one in particular, maybe the last one. Good. Very long questions. Giovanni Francesco Mosca, would you like to take the floor and ask questions? Okay, maybe he's too shy. Do GovTech find easier to work in decentralized Germany or Nordic countries, or more centralized administrative structure like France, Italy, or Spain? Is this something that came up during the study, during the interviews?
We didn't make a specific national comparison.
Okay. Okay, this is an interesting one. The first critical step for interoperability is having a good authentication service. The IDAs and their national nodes. For example, in the Spanish case, I have seen messages popping up. I can't even read the chat. Should be the path to achieve it, but I find two main problems for any software to integrate with them. Sorry, guys, I'd really find difficult to read the chat. Can you please take the floor and ask questions directly? If not, is it in the roadmap, or is it in there any other service to achieve it? Basically, what were they asking? Okay.
There is a raised hand by Arturo.
Please, Arturo.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My question was this that you were reading about authentication. In my case, I'm working for the regional government in Spain, and we're having serial issues with integrating with the regional nodes just for having authentication of any citizen in Europe. And the main issues that we have with this is, first of all, we can not test it. So it's kind of difficult to integrate if you don't have a proper set of data to test the integration. And the other one is that we are having right now is that there is no guarantee that we have the same ID for the same person in different moments. So in this way, we cannot show any historic record for this person. We have no way of having the of just even an email of this person, just to having some way of saying this the same person now and a few days later even. And another way, and another issue that we are just thinking about is if about these regional nodes, we can identify also companies, because there is here I have no clear answer if these services are available for companies or not, but because they are a big part of our clients, not only citizens, but of course companies trying to interact with us. That's the question, more or less.
Okay. Anybody could take the question? Yeah, Gerhard.
Yeah, it is very interesting that you focus on this one technology, and we found this very often with with the GovTechs we interviewed. But we did not really focus on certain technologies or certain interoperability, because the GovTech field is so vast. It is impossible to focus on certain technologies. But what we learned from the study is that the most successful GovTechs, they just have like an API or something, but they provide a fully independent service from what the government is doing. They are not changing their processes. They are providing a platform apart from the public authority they're cooperating with.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. So I think we are approaching the coffee break. I really apologize for the fact that due to the muted microphone, you couldn't take the floor. Nevertheless, now we have unmuted the microphone, and we still have 40 minutes for you to ask questions to the panelists, and the panelists to the public as well, of course, because we would like to have a kind of interactive dialogue between the public and the panelists. So shall we take 10 minutes break, let's say, come back, or at least, yeah, at 3:10, so that you will prepare your questions, and we'll try to give you the best answers we can. Of course, this workshop is also there for us to understand where we missed out anything. Therefore, if there are no answers to your questions, this is good news for us, because this is what is going to drive us to future directions and for the future research questions. Thank you very much. We'll see each other in 10 minutes time. Thank you. Okay, so I hope you all had some coffee or some minutes breaks, and thanks for coming back to us. We are now entering into the core of the exercise, into the discussions about the findings and discussion also with the panelists and the public. So for this event, we have invited two panelists together with Gerhard and Bjorn, when they would like to take questions. The first panelist is Mrs. Petra Nielsen Andersen. She is an innovation officer from the Norwegian Digitalization Agencies, and she represents policymakers and practitioners in the GovTech arena. Since she is from Norway and therefore an European Economic Area country, which is not bound to the uptake or to, let's say, is not bound to the Interoperability Act per se now, it would be interesting to see how she sees the act and how this act can be improved to allow a non-EU country to collaborate with the EU country nevertheless. So this will be my first question, my provocative questions, when it's your turn. And the second panelist is Mrs. Cesar Lopez from Spain. He's a founder of the startup Finspo, and it would be interesting to know how he sees these recommendations reflected in the reality of his own country. Hello, Cesar. Thank you very much for joining us. We will ask you a few questions to see your perspective as a startup founders about this study and the Interoperability Act and how we can help the actual implementation of the Act into the GovTech arena. So, Petra, how would you see cooperation in this case with the EU country in the light of the IOP Act and in the light of the suggestions coming out from this study? How is this? Are these feasible in the sense that you can easily collaborate cross-border with the public administrations in the EU countries, or are we putting even more burdens for you? Is there any room for improvement that we should consider in the future revision of the IOP that could help non-EU countries to collaborate with EU countries?
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. And I would also say that's a really interesting study you have done. There's a lot of findings to build on, so I read it with great interest. I will also say that I attended one of the boot camps earlier this year, arranged by the European Commission, and it was also very interesting to join there. As we heard, Norway has not yet implemented the Interoperability Europe Act, so that is the context or the setting for my comment. I would like to dive into the policy level, because I think that since Norway is not yet part of the EU, I think that would be very interesting to sort of connect the GovTech priorities and align it with policy. Because I think that the GovTech function could drive different key areas of future investments like AI and twin transition, for instance, of green and digital transformation. So I think if also the EU could direct programs and take measures to ensure that we build a European mature and capable ecosystem of GovTech suppliers, and sort of to show the way also on the policy level, that would be very interesting. Perhaps a very clear directed European program further supporting the development of GovTech. And of course, in Norway, just like to mention that we have 2 programs, or have had 2 programs for supporting GovTech and innovative procurement. One being the Supply Development Program, LUP, and the other one was the Startup program, more focusing on experimentation and co-creation together with startups. And unfortunately, the Startup program is not given priority from this political government as of today. So I think it would be very interesting to pressure and give pressure on the policy side. I'm also very interested in what you said about launching GovTech showrooms, because a lot of people not yet know what GovTech is. I don't think there exists any proper definition of GovTech, but the awareness and the knowledge of GovTech in governments, in municipalities, is still very low. So to be able to help the GovTech community, to make them communicate and to show what they have, that would be really interesting, and that is absolutely something we could do cross-border. And then, of course, to enforcement of tender translation, that would be really interesting to further develop on that issue from my point. Thank you.
Marina,
we don't hear you, Marina.
Yeah, thank you very much for these super interesting suggestions. How would you reply, Gerard, or to these suggestions?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think that these policy recommendations can help the cross-border practices of GovTechs in Europe. But what interests me also regarding our study is, Petra, do you think that the study reflects your practices? That means, do you think that you rather support local GovTechs, or do you think that you also, or Norway also promotes the access to foreign GovTechs? So what is your main motivation?
Yes, thank you. No, I think you're. It's quite clear that it's still quite immature, the GovTech concept in Norway. Even though we have a couple of communities and we have startup labs and so on, of course, like all other countries, it's still quite a new concept. So when we work with GovTechs, we are definitely focusing on the local and regional GovTech business. So absolutely, it is a challenge, and I think it would be fantastic if we could work with GovTech across Europe. Absolutely.
Marina, I think you're muted still.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. Please do not hesitate to ask questions to each other. And this one for, we come back to you, Petra, if you need that. Cesar, in your experience, do the results in general of the study and the identified obstacle apply also to Spain? The results and suggestions and the obstacle identified in the study, do they apply also to Spain? Are these reflected in your reality?
You are muted, Cesar.
You're muted.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having us. I guess this session is quite good because I feel really identified in some of the points you highlight during this event. We have also been part of the GovTech Connect a few months ago. And we also are in touch with a few incubators and accelerators in Spain. And few weeks ago, we have also the opportunity to join in one congress in San Francisco, in Silicon Valley, and try to explain to them what it means a GovTech in Europe. That is quite different sometimes, that in terms of how they understand should be to scale SaaS software in the GovTech scenario in Europe. So I guess the study represents the current state of the GovTech sector overall, but I will also to add a few points that I guess is interesting to highlight, no? That the market changed considerably depending on the startup phase. It's not the same for a pre-seed, seed, early stage startups when we are also switching to a scale up. What I have identified in the Spanish market, that is when we talk about seed stage, it's complicated to move forward from a proof of concept or some side projects in the administration. And this is in terms of finding investors. I will highlight also that a pure GovTech startup at the beginning is something really hard for founders, especially when there is no team and there is no initial capital. Yes, I would like to say that false friends and family, probably they are not enough to start a GovTech. So I will also I want to add a few topics regarding the complexity of the components by typical payment timelines and the fundraising strategy we need to follow as a startup. I guess even your success during the pre-seed and seed stage, if you choose to be bootstrap, the market is not really letting bootstrap the startups to be to join the GovTech with contracts. In Spain we call contratos menores. I mean, with contracts they have with a long-term vision really regarding the relation between startup and administration. This for us is a barrier. So the conclusion is the phase, so the stage of the startup and the fundraising models are critical points for a GovTech startup success. Otherwise, so there is another topic. We could say that scaling in the GovTech sector requires a really intensive investment in local agents that sometimes is not easy if you're a product builder, if you're a SaaS company with not having the departments for tenders or for copywriting. So it requires a complex structure, no? And also that the partnership models and unified soft landing strategies could be interesting solutions to face these problems that are already found in the Spanish market. So create soft landing programs and offer office space, legal advice, and business development support in the new markets, as offer ethics in Spain for us, are critical, for example, to enter in new markets. I have some other points I want to highlight, but I don't know if there is enough time, Marie.
I think that what you just mentioned is quite important. The proof of concepts, that's very costly, very time intensive, very resource intensive, and we all know that unfortunately many public administrations want their own proof of concept, so the startup is called to replicate but differentiate the proof of concepts to adapt to each public administrations. That's a very important hindering factor. Would it help to you? This is just thinking aloud. Would it be a kind of solution if there was a kind of agreement on a minimal set of requirements for proof of concepts to be accepted by all public administrations, so that the startups are not obliged to lose so many resources on it? Would it help?
Would it help? Because as far the incubators in the GovTech scenario, they are trying to set up GovTech. So let's say challenges from the administration. This doesn't mean there is a GovTech way to grow, because if it's a space to showcase, it's okay, but we need to showcase with our own technology, not by solving the problem of a third part that sometimes is not even in touch of what it means. For example, to use AI in some points of the administration. I'm not talking about RPAs. We are talking about, in our case, no, because we are trying to solve migration workflows topics around Europe. That is a really complicated challenge, and this also is also connected to a really strong legal framework, not only by the local regulations, is about the next the next law in Europe regarding AI. So in our case I guess it's an amazing idea, but should be implemented also from the beginning, from how we interact with the different administrations. Incubators as well, they need to boost and catalyze this type of ideas as well, or projects.
Yeah, and Petra, I see that you are not in your head. Maybe you would like to say something burning that you have.
Well, yeah, I have a lot of comments I would like to forward, and I especially like what the researcher said about how GovTech could be a driver for transforming government, that there is a huge opportunity. And I think that is very wise, because there are different, what do you say, meanings, because first of all, the political level and the governments and the ministries then know what GovTech is. And I think they need hands-on experience. And also that could influence how you from the Norwegian government in January, the Norwegian Digitalization Agency, to develop an analysis on the status of innovation in the public sector in Norway. And instead of just sort of diving into all the annual reports of all the national agencies, we decided to use a GovTech, a startup, focusing on AI. And we built an embedded model, and we scanned all the reports, the national reports and the annual reports, looking for innovation. And we also got a lot of support from the minister, she's really positive to AI. And in that sense, we also made a great communication. We were on TV. We were also communicating this in the government, and we actually did the deed. So in that sense, using GovTech as a driver for transformation, I think there is a huge potential, and it's a win-win for all parts. So I just wanted to comment on that, to give a case. Thank you.
Yes, this goes back to what the study said about having the blessing from the public authorities. The blessing can help a lot in terms of development, in terms of labels, in terms of trusts, in terms of infrastructure, helping you to develop your activities together with startups. Okay, Gerard, you would like to say something?
Yeah, Cesar, it is so exciting what you're talking about, because we interviewed 111 startups, and everyone says something slightly different, and we have to summarize it somehow. And then you say, I can identify with so many points of your research, and this is just great to hear as a researcher. But when I think about the things we found out in the in the study, which of the recommendations do you think would have the highest impact for your startup, and therefore you would implement first?
Whoa, but I guess it's a really good opportunity. So regarding our experience is about how we interact with the different tender opportunities. Because if there is no data, there is no knowledge, and there is no possibility to build in continuous improvement model our strategies without to burn a lot of money. I'm talking as a bootstrap guy. So for us, this will be critical in terms of understand market. If we are not able to understand market with a unified data source, for us there is no beginning, there is no point to move forward, because otherwise we will always perform with short-term strategies. So unify one data source, standardize, understand different markets from the regional. In Spain, we have a different level of GovTech. It's not the same to perform with a Gemeinde, with a mayor, and that's with the national government. So understand from data analysis how should be the right strategy for a startup. For us will be amazing.
And if you say understanding the market, what would help you to understand the market? What would help you to grasp like the slightly differences across Europe to actually practice cross-border?
Okay, I will talk as in the two different levels. So the market from the technology point, from what it means, the standard KPIs of a startup is quite clear. So what is the total addressable market? What are the GovTech metrics? We have been talking with the guys in the Valley, $3.8 trillion in US. But this is, for us, is not relevant. We need to understand the market from the point of view of how to enter into the market, how to do soft landing, how to add value to the different layers of the public authorities, and how to create trust and engagement. Because there is some other points they're not mentioned, but I guess it's because the study needs to be focused in some parts. Is AI still a topic that sometimes in the administration creates a barrier for the for public sector workers, and this is something is only we need to identify and to include in our strategies, because technology needs to be a driver for the administration and needs to catalyze and helps employees of the different layers of the administration. I'm also talking because I'm lucky because I'm from a rural area and I have to talk with different stakeholders. Sometimes rural areas, they have a completely different approach, what it means to transform and digitalize administration.
And you also mentioned trust, and we also identified that trust is a huge problem in the public sector. And what a lot of the GovTech said was that they find themselves in loops of creating proof of concepts and showing evidence that their solution is working also for the next, the third or fourth municipality or city. Do you think that a certificate like certifying that the POC is valid from the European Union could help you to avoid these endless loops?
Honestly, it's just something could add value, but will not, in our experience, will not push the buyer to take the decision. we find more effective to use marketplace from cloud vendors. I will not mention name, but probably everyone is having on mind. For example, one is the creator of the tool we are using right now, that they offer us formulas to create trust through a marketplace of a third part. That the challenge is these marketplaces are working in pay-as-you-go. They are working in another types of formulas that they are not specifically addressed to a tender. So in my opinion, yes, will help, but will help also to amplify the range of options that has the administration to test new softwares. Otherwise, the process will be always really tough in terms of timing and in terms of how we can create this trust from the different levels of the administration.
Thank you.
May I add on that? Because I completely agree with Cesar that I thought it was a really interesting idea with the certificate, and sort of it's a, they're all European. There is support for they're qualified or whatever. There's a good intent in that, but still it boils down to the culture of the government or administration. They need to have trust and be less risk aversive and all that. Work more with experimentation, and it boils down to that. So I think to be able to develop a sustainable GovTech function in government, we need to build and sort of an infrastructure almost with people that had the right skills on process and tools and methods and everything. That you need to have that in place in order to be a capable public sector asking for GovTech support. So and one way to do it could be to sort of appoint some kind of GovTech champions who could be promote GovTech, or also to have strong directives asking the executive leaders, for instance, in public sector, that they should work with GovTech or startup. So I think you need some more stronger tools in order to make it happen.
This is very interesting. So actually, yes, the intervention of champions backed up by authorities that would lead somehow the way and try to, let's say, address these not so much technical issues, but more process issues, funding issues, culture, trust, skills, tools, and methods, which are absolutely needed even before thinking about a technological solution. So that's very interesting, and I think this also came out clearly back from the study. Okay, Cesar, and then we open up to the public. Thank you.
So I completely agree with what you mentioned. In Spain, there is some initiatives like Compra Pública Innovadora, and we have the Compra Pública Innovadora attitude, where they try to help some public administrations to identify the champions, as you mentioned, in order to, let's say, to browse the market, to also to set up some new tenders, some new process regarding innovation into the administration. But just to summarize as a personal experience, that we need to make it somehow fun, because otherwise, while someone is inside of the administration is trying to innovate, is taking so much risk, individual risk, and if we are not able to make this process, I use the word fun, but it's probably is not the best one, but we need to make it
let's say
lean
and rewarding, and all contribute.
but somehow also it's good to support them during this process and make to understand the proof of concepts are not production environments. I have always this discussion with all the customers. POC is not a functional and production environment, and not everything will work to the first attempt. We need to understand that the testing environments are critical to success. Will be my message.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think we could go on for not forever, for at least half an hour, but I would really like to open the floor to the public. So before taking the questions in the chat, I would really like that you raise your hand, you say your name, and you say who you represent, and ask the question directly to the panelists and to the study experts. Is there anybody who dares raising the hand? Okay, so Frederick, please go ahead. Can we give the floor to Frederick?
Hello, can you hear me? Fredrik Øygård from Norway. Hello, Petra. I'm a digital transformation leader in the public sector. And before that, I was a CEO of a GovTech startup for many years. So this is my daily work, and I have experience from both sides in this. In the chat, I have summarized a couple of issues that needs to be addressed to be able for the GovTechs to be able to have a chance at all. The first is in Norway, you have this tax policy that directly harms startups because you have to have a wealth tax that taxes your paper value of your company, which means leads into the second problem is that you are not able to be considered someone who can send a bid to a government, send in a bid to a government purchasing unless you have enough cash flow in your company, because it's too high risk to purchase from you. So, but if you have the cash through selling shares, but you don't actually have the cash through actually selling your product yet, because you don't have a customer yet, and you have a GovTech, which means your primary customer is the government, you are basically in a catch-22. And this leads to the third thing is that the public sector is still very analog in how it works, which means that if the public sector themselves creates a bid, and I know because I am the public sector that creates bids, is that, and I help them with this, they send out a bid that is tied to an existing challenge, but the existing challenges are tied to analog thoughts and analog rules and analog regulations. Still, which means that even if then you actually have the desire to change in order to be able to even be able to purchase or have a partnership in creating truly innovative solutions. This means that when you actually implement the innovative solutions and have a benefit from it, you actually change how the processes within the government body on how people actually works, which ties in that you then are talking about labor unions and all the change management problems, challenges you have, where you have a set of people who are hired to follow a process, and then you purchase a system where you change all the processes. And if you, as a government entity, want to purchase this system and actually get this, you actually have to realize this is immediately a digital transformation, and that you have to change the process in order to get things out, which means that it's very risky to purchase a government technological company, a solution from a GovTech company. And the result is that there are a lot of companies that have real solutions to real problems that the governments are simply unable to purchase because of these internal challenges. And this, by the way, is my daily. So I'm actually addressing these problems internally. So that was my comment.
Okay. Anybody else who dares asking questions directly?
I would just comment, Fredrik, I'm not disagreeing. we know this, and there is a lot of politics in this, of course, as well. So yeah, thanks for a very good comment, Frederick.
Okay, anybody else? Otherwise, we'll take the questions from the chat. Okay, let's see one of the questions.
There is a person, sorry, Marina, who raised
okay.
the hand.
Yes, please, somebody help me in managing 3 different windows. Please go ahead. And can you please say your name?
Yeah. Can you understand me? You all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, fine. My name is Diane Young, and I'm a public police officer in the Ministry of Labor.
Can you please get closer to, we can't hear well. We can't see you. And we can't hear you.
Now?
Yes, it's much better. Thank you.
Perfectly. Yes, I'm a police officer at the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs in Saxony-Anhalt. And thank you very much for the insightful input and presentation. It was very, yes, inspiring to hear, and to hear that like most of the government or public sector and the public sector do have the same challenges. What I did miss, is maybe probably from the perspective for the public sector, what I missed is to emphasize the so-called entrenched structure and workings method of the public sector, which probably also do cause a lot of challenges for GovTech. And secondly, is also the fact that, of course, the awareness and understanding of GovTech is not, how to say it, public known as like, it's not so well promoted in the public sector. So that's why also some officials do struggle with the fact that new and startups who haven't shown who have proved themselves get involved in some in the system, where also like the fact that there's some national theme like national security is a problem or an issue. So I do understand the struggle of the GovTech with entering new market and so on, and getting involved in the public sector. But what I would understand, like, what approach exactly do the public sector, the GovTechs have to overcome the entrenched structure and working methods of the public sector? Because in Europe we do have different working system. So coming from Spain or from Belgium and coming working in Germany, that will, for me as a public sector official, would be like, okay, just give me like, you have to really to prove yourself to me to show like you can work within our system and with our system. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Right. I think it's time to go to the questions raised in the chat, unless there's nobody else, because we are approaching the end of the event. What type of matchmaking do start-up local authorities wish for? Did you consider the authority perspective in the study? I think this was already at least somehow replied. Unless there's anybody who would like to give some more comments on that. And then, are there any lessons learned from member states' public organizations that have already used innovation procurement for services or products by GovTech startups on the GovTech ecosystem? What is the level of competition between mainstream companies and GovTech startups? This is an interesting question. What is the level of competition between mainstream companies and GovTech startups? Nobody from the panel would like to answer? Do you have any clue about this question?
Well,
go ahead, Susan.
So in our experience, if it depends what you consider a mainstream enterprises, because there is only one level of competitions, is how big is the contract. So we have this KPI that from an amount an amount of euros that the big players in the industry, normally consulting companies, they don't go to these tenders. But in terms of identify GovTech startups market, I guess there is no real competition. We don't have we don't need to create to showcase in front of companies that they do the same solutions as us, because normally we perform in a completely blue ocean in terms of what we do and who is our target market.
Okay, all right. One more question. How early do GovTech companies get bought or acquired by more mature mainstream enterprises before they can take off themselves? And therefore stifling innovation or inspiration to solve public challenges that are not any viable solution yet? Intriguing question. Cesar, I think it's still to you, or maybe together than you.
Yeah, it's a good question. In our expertise, there is a phenomenon related to M&A with GovTech companies or GovTech startups and big players in the industry. While they detect that the solution could have a fit in the administration, they invest directly into these startups, and sometimes they also just arrive to a deal with the founder for an exit plan in 2-3 years to just acquire the technology. If it's a company, for example, dedicated to one vertical in Spain, for example, is managing 80-70% of the market in the industry. Normally, they in 3-4 months, the M&A process or the exit plan is already on the table of the founder. So it's quite hard to scale a startup in the tech sector if you have a product market fit during the first stage.
All right.
I can add to that if I may.
Yes, please, Frederick.
What usually happens is that you have this choke the baby strategy from the existing companies. They try to just keep you away from actually getting a contract. If you buy a lot of sheer grit and effort and a lot of work actually get the contract, they may try to purchase you, as mentioned by Cesar. But what then happens is that they purchase you, they take away your social power, and then they basically kill your product. So that they can keep on selling the same crap. That's the public sector, the vendor market to Norway. We are basically purchasing crap again and again and again, because the truly innovative solutions are just taken off the market, either through that we just don't buy them fast enough, or if we buy them, they are taken bought up by companies that then kill them. So and the way to get out of this circle, there is no other way that the leadership within the public sector are actually capable of purchasing innovative solutions and tie it to a digital transformation within their own organizations. The only success stories we have in Norway for this is when the top leadership within the tax agency and now within the NAV, I don't know the welfare, is that they have a digital master that does not take any kind of bullshit, and just create an environment for digital transformation. And this creates the environment to actually purchase technologies of substance from the government GovTech companies.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That also recalls the comment that I see in the chat that the GovTech ecosystem needs to include those who create long-term flourishment of the GovTech industry. And these are officials who know what they are talking about, who know the GovTech arena, the needs of the public administration. So once more, we get back to the fact that you need the right people at the right place at the right. That's for sure. And with this, I think we have to come to a closure of this webinar. I have collected a number of let's say, messages here and also critical factors. But what I would like to say is that, I mean, at least the one, what I'm taking away from this webinar is that, of course, this is a complex environment. It's controversial because the different actors have different objectives. There are policy objectives that sometimes do not coincide with the economic objectives of the local public administrations and the startups. So how to reconcile these different objectives is still, let's say, to be addressed. There are critical issues for the fundings, critical issues for entering into the market, critical issues in changing the culture, in changing the way GovTech becomes visible to both the government, the public administrations, and the startups. So there is a need to get together and create some momentum with some visibility, also with some champions, for example. In different countries, there are still some bottlenecks to be addressed. But what really strikes me more is that at the end of the day, we are having a workshop on interoperability of cross-border solutions and in order to reuse the solutions and components. But at the end of the day, we have spoken about technology in very few instances. So that says to me that at the end of the day, it is not so much technology that drives this area either. It's really the motivation, is really people seeing the benefit that this can bring along. So the benefits for different actors, the public administrations, the political governance, and the startups, local economy. So maybe a way to reconcile the different objectives of this actor is to come up with shared and common shared benefits, visible benefits for each of them, creating kind of win-win situation. That's what I'm taking from this exercise. There are so many other questions that need to be answered. And I'm very glad that the public posted these questions, because these will be very useful for the next study experts and our future directions, both as policy DGs from my colleagues up in Brussels, Andrea and her management, and for our colleagues here at the JRCs in terms of research questions. So I'm really very happy for the participation in this event, for the rich discussion that we had, for the hints that you gave us to lead up into future directions. And I would like to close this event by saying that this is the third this is the second of the series of public sector Tech Watch events, and the third one will take place on 27th of May. Please do not hesitate to participate, and don't hesitate to reply to the survey, which is online. And another announcement that I'm asked to say is that the public sector Tech Watch will be present at the CEMIC conference in June in Brussels. And during this event, there will be a competition for the best case award open. So please don't hesitate to send us your cases and to enroll to the competition. This can also be one of the, let's say, drop in the sea on to showcase, to make yourself visible and take a step forward in this area. So again, thank you so much for participating in this. Thank you, Petra. Thank you, Cesar. Your witness, let's say, it has been very, very useful to us. Gerard and Bjorn, thanks for your efforts in this endeavor. It's not finished. This is just the start of the journey. So I thank you again for this first step, for kicking up this exercise. And I hope I'll see you soon for the next step forward. Thank you very much again. And enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.